to look at in this video is how to calculate GST. Now, it depends on what we're given. First thing we've got to remember, GST is a goods and services tax. So we've discussed that in class, so we know what a GST stands for and why it comes about. So there's two ways we can look at GST. The first one is where we have prices given that exclude the GST or not including the GST. So what we've got to do when we see something like that is actually calculate the GST. Now we know in Australia we take GST as 10%. So what that basically means is whatever price we get, so for example here our deluxe gel seat cover costs us $420 for 20 of them. What we've got to do is calculate how much GST we're going to actually have to pay. Now because it's 10% of our price, that makes, we take the 420 and we take 10% of that and we throw in our calculator and we see that we get $42. So that's where that price comes from there, $42. So where we actually have to, what price we actually have to pay for it is 462, because that's what we have to include the GST. 420 would go to our supplier. This would be Mike's Big Bikes, and Mike, we have to pay that the $42 as well in this price to Mike, but Mike actually pays that on to the Australian Taxation Office. So he actually he has to actually do that. So he can't just take that 42 and keep it. He actually makes it. So all the prices there, $1,041, and we can see 10% of that price is $104.10. So that's the GST, and that's where we put the GST, and we get what we call a GST inclusive price. So that's why it says including GST, excluding GST. So the GST is added there and we get that price. So that's when we get a price where the GST is not included. Now most of the time our GST is included. And you can see in this example where it says GST inclusive. So they're quoting you a price for Sir Walter Buffalo Lawns at $10.90 meters squared per meter squared. So, but if we want to actually work out what the GST is, we have to do a little bit of calculations ourselves. So what it's actually saying, because that price is including the GST, we can look at it this way. We can set up a nice equation where we go, we had a price, so let the price be X, and to that we added 10% of that price in GST. And our price ended up being that $10.90. So there's a nice little equation. We put out 10% of our price, our X there. So all up, what the $10.90 represents there is really 100% of X plus 10% of X. So it really represents that 110% of the original price before we had to pay GST. So if 110% of our price is equal to $10.90, well, our value of X can be given to us by $10.90. And then we divide that by our 110%. Or if you want to convert that to a decimal, it's 1.1. But you can leave it at 110%. Throw that into your calculator, do the calculation, and you would get there, and it'll be an approximation here. We'll make sure we tell it's an approximation. It'll come out to $9.91 when we round it to the nearest cent. So that's the original price we're going to pay. So when we want to work out our GST that we're actually going to pay, well, that would be 10% of that, which again would be approximately equal to the 99 cents. And if you do your calculations, our $9.91 plus our 99 cents would get us back to our $10.90. So there you can see that, well, there's the price plus the GST gives us the $10.90 that's GST inclusive. Showing that once again, let's show it with the Nullarbor Couch range of lawn. So our final price was $5.50, and again we started with a price and we took 10% of that price as GST and added it to get that final $5.50. So again, 110% of our original price is equal to the $5.50, and so we do our division, $5.50 divided by 110%, and we get a price for that at $5 with a GST component of 50 cents. So our $5.50 makes up the $5.50. So there's our price there. Now, what we've got to be careful of, really be careful of, what people tend to do with this one when they have to calculate the GST. Because they know it's a 10% GST, what they like to do is just to take 10% of that price. Now, if you have a look, if you took 10% of that one, that'd be $1.09, which doesn't match up to our GST of 99 cents. It's more. And if you took the GST of 10% on that one, they'd give you 55, which is more than what we actually got. The error people make is to say, well, it's GST inclusive, so I'll just take 10% of that price. But remember, the 10% for the GST is on the original price, not the final price. So a lot of people make that error in trying to calculate the GST. Be really careful. If the price is already GST inclusive, we're getting the 10% on the original, not the final price, because that's already got 10% included. This is how we have to get our GST if the price is GST inclusive.